guys, you're listening to Beauty Bytes with Dr. K, Secrets of a Plastic Surgeon, and today's podcast is going to be so interesting. We have Zaid Dahhaj. He is a citizen scientist. He's a champion of photobiomodulation, and that is saying that sunlight is actually good for you, and maybe we're too indoctrinated in the sunscreen, sun is bad culture. So I'm so curious. I've been reading your posts and also your newsletter, and he has a lot of scientific, really important things to say about sun and infrared and how different light frequencies. The human body was evolved to love light, actually. So let's talk about it. Tell me your background a little.
Yeah, so my background is definitely unconventional. I don't have a degree, no PhD, no certification to my name, at least no centralized, quote-unquote centralized certification. So for me, it's I've really taken an obsessive approach to understanding circadian biology and everything that has to do with light. Ever since, really my dad passed of a heart attack at the age of 51, and I was 18 at the time. So for me, this is really, it goes beyond just an area of study. It's really a mission for me. And I think the most important thing on my end is to try to educate myself and other people through this work. And so a quick breakdown of circadian biology is we're essentially just talking about the 24-hour cycle that your body follows in relation to the movement of the sun and the moon. And so if we look at the entire body as one system, it is a circadian system, meaning you have light-sensitive proteins in your skin, you have mitochondria, which I would argue are light-sensing, circadian-controlled organelles, and every organ, tissue, protein, enzyme in the body is controlled by the circadian mechanism. So it's very important in my mind.
I think it really is. People don't understand how we are very evolutionarily attuned animals, and millions of years of evolution have gone into building this body. And so I really think it's important that we think back to caveman days. When were we in the sun? How did our systems work? And how's that different from modern life days?
Well, it's completely different. I mean, you're talking about, if we're looking at evolutionary times, you had a circadian species that was in tune with the light and dark cycle. So what I say is bright days outside under the full spectrum of sun, of course seeking shade as well, and then darkness at night with minimal circadian lighting. So either firelight, incandescents are a bit newer in terms of their introduction, but either way, that's the foundation of it. It's just that we have bright days during the day and dark nights. Now, when we go into modern society today, that's skewed. It's completely flipped. Now you have most people spending up to 90 to 95% of their time indoors. You have altered spectrums of light through low emission glass, and then you have very bright nights, which completely disrupt the repair process of the body, causes circadian disruption, which leads to a whole host of issues. So I think that's the keystone pillar of it all.
I don't think society's going to change in the future, unfortunately, because I see that I myself am spending 90% of my days under fluorescent light indoors, and barely catching an hour of dusk, and then nighttime is all screen time, sadly. But that's, I think, kind of what we're programmed into our lives now.
Yeah, and there are ways around it. There are ways that we can implement more circadian-friendly principles to, I think, improve metabolic health and prevent chronic disease. But we do have to understand that is fundamentally a problem, because we are a circadian species that is designed to be in a very specific environment.
So true. And so I think a big thing that initially I saw in your account was this whole talking about the idea that sunscreen is not necessarily the answer, and that the dermatology world has really put out the messaging, and to their credit, like we're trying to avoid skin cancers, melanomas, and things that can kill you and age you. So sunscreen has been the religious principle of dermatologists from the 1950s onwards, and it's really drilled down into our culture. But you have a kind of different philosophy and approach, and you talk about how you need to kind of modulate your body's exposure to sun. You can't be on sunscreen and no sun and then go out and not expect to burn. So building up a sun tolerance is one thing, and the other thing is maybe this principle that sunscreen should be used differently.
Yeah, so for me, I think things like basal or squamous cell carcinoma, melanoma, these are very complex disease processes, right? So the position I take is that, number one, all anti-cancer processes are under circadian control. So if we break the circadian mechanism chronically, we leave the door open for cancer manifestation. Now, in regards to the sunscreen discussion, I'm more so an advocate, and this is why I get pretty controversial to people who
This is why you get in trouble.
Exactly.
Get
People look at
ready.
my work and
People are listening. All the germs are
they'll
listening
call me a
right
quack,
now.
they'll call me
They're
a
going to talk to me
pseudoscientist.
too later, but I still want to bring this point of view forward.
Sure. But these are very important points that I think are very well founded in the scientific literature, whether it's circadian biology, evolutionary biology, even in the literature that we have available today. Number one, sunscreen, chemical-based sunscreens are a big problem in my mind because of potential photocarcinogens. You have avobenzone, oxybenzone. In and of themselves, these chemical ingredients aren't necessarily harmful, right? But the problem is when they interact with heat and light, especially in high UV index conditions, then they can transform into what is known as a photocarcinogen, which is problematic in my mind over the long term if it's used chronically, so forth. But I think the bigger problem with sunscreen is its ability to actually alter the sun's full spectrum. When I talk about low emission glass and the famous truck driver case study where one face is completely damaged, the other is not, that's a problem of low emission glass, not full spectrum sunlight in my mind. So if we take a look at how low emission glass changes the spectrum, it'll primarily focus UVA and blue light in isolation, shorter wavelengths, higher energy, and it'll dramatically reduce red and infrared, which
Is that the glass that's in all our buildings, basically?
for the most part.
Yeah.
Most cars, most buildings nowadays, low emission glass.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's taking out the good light, the infrared, and the frequencies that are gentler.
It's more so breaking the synergistic power involved with full spectrum sunlight. So in nature, you don't find UV light in isolation or blue light in isolation. You always find UV and blue paired with red and infrared. And in fact, most of the sun spectrum, 3 to 5% of it's UV. The rest is 42 to 45% visible light, which is red included, and then 50 to 55% is infrared. So I always maintain that there is this synergistic impact of combining red and infrared with the shorter wavelengths to where we see totally different outcomes as opposed to studying isolated UV or isolated blue light, especially on nocturnal animals or skin cell cultures.
And so the human body's evolved to need all these frequencies in combination, not
Exactly.
in isolation. So what happens then when you're putting on sunscreen that's blocking certain wavelengths?
Well, blocking UVA and UVB is problematic in my mind because there are a lot of benefits that those wavelength ranges offer. So, UVA stimulating nitric oxide in the body, acting as a vasodilator, improving hemodynamics, blood flow, all this good stuff for the cardiovascular system. And then UVB is the only light wavelength range responsible for vitamin D3 production.
I think no one actually gets taught that or realizes that,
So
honestly.
it's a big
Because I
point.
think in our heads, UVA, aging, causes aging, very bad. UVB, B for bad, causes skin cancers.
Or burns, I've heard that, yeah.
Burns, yeah. And so that's really the indoctrinated thinking that's very true. That's true also with the facts, the goodness of these frequencies and UVs is also being ignored. But how can you get an appropriate dose without transitioning to cancer or bad aging changes?
Yeah, so if you want to talk about my philosophy on the connection between quote-unquote full spectrum sunlight and skin cancer or photoaging, that's an entire rabbit hole, but for me, I'm always about approaching this in a very wise manner because sunlight is powerful. UV light, blue light, all of these wavelengths are very powerful. And so we have to approach it through the lens of progressive overload. In the same way that you prepare yourself through warm-up for a training session, in the same way that you expose yourself to a training session and then recover from it after, that's kind of the philosophy that I take with sunbathing when UV is present. So it is a hormetic stress. That's the most important thing.
Hormesis. Yeah.
Exactly.
The concept that you need some stress level to trigger systems of repair, balance, and synergy in your body.
Yeah.
That you can't have every day be like those people and organisms that every day get the right overdose of antioxidants, overdose of vitamins, too much minerals, everything no stress at all on the body. The stress repair systems break down.
Exactly. So classic distinction of eustress and distress. And so this is what I think centralized medicine and dermatology more specifically doesn't consider. It's just that they view, let's say, melanin as a form of DNA or skin damage, when in fact it's a very reductive way to look at it because there's so many other things that melanin offers from a health perspective. And furthermore, if you look at hormesis as a subject, the entire body is built off of this hormetic response, especially from a circadian standpoint. So, UV light interacts with the skin. It does create thymine dimers, but what people don't consider is that on the back end, there are many different pathways to heal or recover from that quote-unquote damage. So you have nucleotide excision repair, you have endogenous melatonin in the skin. All of these things are designed to basically balance out any quote-unquote damage that come as a result of that exposure. And so this is why I often refer to eustress and hormesis.
So UVB is necessary for creating vitamin D. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so endogenous vitamin D3 production from UVB is a very unique process. It goes through many different conversion steps to inevitably become vitamin D3 that we can use. But I always get into this classic distinction of vitamin D from a pill, exogenous, is not the same thing as vitamin D from the sun, or UVB, which is endogenous.
Which now everybody's being prescribed 50,000 units of vitamin D weekly because they're so D deficient.
Yeah.
And
And
you're saying that's a whole different D structure than what you need.
A whole different transport route, essentially. If you look through the work of Dr. Alexander Wunsch, he talks about how the two go through very different transport routes within the body. UVB and vitamin D3 go through the vitamin D binding transport route, and then vitamin D supplements go through the lipoprotein route, which are very inefficient. It's a totally inefficient means of actually getting vitamin D, and then obviously translating into all these longevity benefits and whatnot. This is why I think you don't see all of the longevity results that sunlight offers when we're looking at vitamin D supplementation. And furthermore, I think that we don't consider that there are many vitamin D metabolites. There are water-soluble forms. A lot of people talk about how infants can't get vitamin D from breastfeeding, but when you understand that there are water-soluble forms, then it starts to make a lot more sense.
Interesting. And then talk about UVA a little bit, because yes, infrared has the benefits of vasodilation, nitric oxide production, but is also known for creating aging changes with loss, breakdown of collagen and elastin and giving skin the aged look. So is there a remedy or solution for that, getting that exposure without getting that effect?
Yeah, I think just having a wise approach to, priming your skin in the morning time before UV comes out first is really the general recommendation that I give for most people, especially lighter skinned individuals.
And how do you prime your skin like that?
It's just sunbathing in the morning. Just
so going out there, but by early morning you mean like when sunrise? Sunrise is the time when those best infrared rays, right?
Yeah, I mean it can range maybe 9 to 10 a.m. is the cutoff point to where UVA starts to come out, but and it depends on latitude, of course. But yeah, generally just sunbathing, getting most of the skin exposed during that red and infrared rich portion of the day. It's also super important for circadian signaling and a whole bunch of other things. UVA rise is also very important for a whole separate set of things. But I think that priming point is really the most important thing. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, we had most of our skin exposed during the morning time in order to prepare for UV. And this is actually why people recommend that you get any sort of radiological testing during the midday. Because all of the anti-cancer processes in your body are upregulated during that time, since it's essentially designed to sense radiation from the sun. And outside of that, microdosing UV when it's out is very important, slowly building up in order to build more melanin. Again, super controversial if people are listening to this from the mainstream, but I think this has very strong backing in terms of its not only anecdotal but scientific evidence. And then making it dark at night, because the skin barrier actually repairs itself during the nighttime. So, DNA repair cycles, melatonin, all this stuff works for you.
Yeah, I saw in one of your newsletters you read about different cell types like fibroblasts, Merkel cells, sebum-producing cells, and like how they are cyclically off and on at their highest levels of function. So, what stood out to you? When do fibroblasts function best and most at different peaks of light or day?
I believe they're upregulated in terms of, and this is something I have to go deeper on because that was a new newsletter, but I believe they're most active during the midday. And during the nighttime when darkness ensues and you have proper endogenous melatonin production, I believe they're also doing a lot of work on that end.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there are also some evidence that Merkel cells, which are the immune-fighting cells in the system, and the Langerhans cells migrate towards the cell surface during daytime. I thought that was fascinating. Like, why haven't we heard that more in med school and in all of our scientific conferences, that the actual sun and the timing of the day, these cells know to come from their depths up to the surface to surveil the skin surface for bacteria and organisms. And you're running through danger through the jungles and you get scratched up. You need those spider cells up there. So I think that we have still so much to learn about that cell function. Can you talk a little bit about melanin and melatonin in general? Because we're a society that's taking a ton of oral exogenous melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you have views and concepts on melanin and melatonin.
Yeah, melanin for me is, I think, nature's most incredible biopolymer, biological polymer. If you take a look at where it's found, I mean, it's basically found everywhere in nature. So you have eumelanin, which is responsible for the darks, blacks and browns. Think of like a gorilla, think of a black panther. That's eumelanin at work. That happens to block 99% of UV light, so it's a very effective sunscreen, while also allowing a little bit through for systemic function. Pheomelanin is more so responsible for the reds, yellows, oranges in nature. Think of a red fox, pink flamingo, lighter skinned people. And so this is, it is generally less protective initially, around 30 to 40% blockage of UV light. But the important thing that we need to understand is that these various forms of melanin are as old as time.
Mm-hmm.
So for the idea that it's exclusively a sign of skin damage or DNA damage is kind of nonsense to me. I think that there's a lot more and that's too reductive. And so there's also neuromelanin found in the brain. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people make the connection between that and neurodegenerative disorders, Parkinson's, all that. So I think if you look at the benefits, scientific benefits in the literature, it's an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, potentially anti-cancer, energy transducer, meaning it can take electromagnetic radiation from the sun and actively turn it into an available form of energy for the body. So there's quite a long list of benefits to melanin. And then in terms of melatonin, I mean, it's also a circadian master hormone. You have the daytime form, subcellular form that's made from mitochondria. That needs near-infrared light from the sun to be produced. And then you have the nighttime form, which is made from darkness. That's the circulatory form.
And then the women are routinely finding their brown spots in their melasma. And when we see melasma on the skin surface, what's that kind of a sign of? Your melatonin's getting congregated in areas of damage or pretty high exposure, wanting your body's trying to protect you?
From my study, I think that it is fundamentally a problem of circadian disruption, so chronic circadian disruption of the skin. Because if you look at like pigmentation in general, this is a circadian-driven process that relies heavily on mitochondrial function. So the mitochondria need energy to produce enough ATP, which then drives melanin synthesis or melanogenesis. So I think that's a huge part of the discussion, especially considering chronic disease is at an all-time high. Many people have multiple comorbidities, which means they have chronic mitochondrial dysfunction. And so I think pigmentation is one of those interesting effects that we see as to something going wrong, whether it's hypopigmentation, hyperpigmentation, melasma. It's an incredible, I think, representation of what's actually happening in relation to skin dysfunction and circadian dysfunction.
Well, it's almost like the body's creating this umbrella of shade over this area where cells have damage and need some healing, or maybe they're catching up with genetic repair, DNA repair, under this umbrella of melasma shade.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I have some interesting theories on that, but I was just curious on your thoughts too. But from a cell standpoint, you mentioned mitochondria. Let's talk a little bit of light exposure. How does light exposure affect mitochondrial function, skin barrier repair, or the aging pathways like mTOR pathways?
So for me, if we look at the full spectrum, I do believe that every light wavelength involved plays some sort of role in mitochondrial function. I mean, most notably, you have red and infrared, cytochrome C oxidase within the electron transport chain, that's the fourth complex, is notable for absorbing, I believe, red and infrared. There are actually chromophores that absorb that light. And so even if you look through the entire electron transport chain, there are chromophores everywhere within it. So, it's sensing, you have porphyrins that sense blue, you have other mechanisms that sense UV, and go down the list. But I think that cytochrome C oxidase, that complex 4, is the most important part in order to use light to generate energy within the system. So, and you think about how many mitochondria you have, it's trillions. So it's not only a game of food. That's the important thing that I think I want more people to understand, is that light is in and of itself a nutrient for mitochondrial function and signaling. So, if you can use light properly and you understand that mitochondria are a circadian organelle, then you can understand how to shift your lifestyle in order to get the best out of that.
Well, you hear these stories of yogis that go up to the Himalayas and they're fasting, they're not eating anything, and they're just sitting in the sun. And that, like, essentially, I think that they have that level of self-consciousness and self-realization where somehow they're able to turn on their mitochondria as their feeding system.
Mm-hmm.
That cytochrome or something gets activated, because literally it seems impossible, but these yogis come down from being in the Himalayas in India,
Yeah.
and they are surviving on literally just, you know, water, moisture in the air, and sunlight.
Also, I think, I mean, that could be controversial to many people, but I do agree.
Yeah, it sounds like it's crazy and it's a fraud.
Yeah.
However, there are many, many stories of this over the centuries.
Yeah.
And some humans can finally attune their systems to interact with nature in that way.
And high altitude, meaning
Yes.
more UV, meaning more melanin.
Maybe.
If you look at the Sherpas and, you know, the, forgot the name, Sherpas in the famous mountain,
Mount Everest.
Mount Everest, there we
Yeah.
go. I mean, they're super tan.
Yeah.
And they're known for carrying like 3 times their body weight or something crazy like that.
Yeah, with half the oxygen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I think that there is some reality and truth there to that concept that in humans, your mitochondria function like in a plant, the chloroplasts function. And it's not beyond science to think that light energy can go into an organelle like a chloroplast or mitochondria and generate ATP and keep an organism alive. It happens for plants every day of every week of all eternity. But do you have any theories about how that can affect, in general, like those anti-aging pathways, like the mTOR pathway, when your mitochondria are working more efficiently?
mTOR I haven't really studied, and I'm always very open about things that I don't know or haven't studied yet. But I do believe that full spectrum sunlight and just circadian alignment in general is the ultimate anti-aging hack.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, you look at the entire system, from the skin barrier, whether it's the hypodermis, dermis, epidermis, all of it is light sensing in nature.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is you have to do some digging. You have to understand what opsins are, what mitochondria, you know, serve as a key role in the body. So, yeah, I think just in general, bright days and dark nights are really the key that people don't focus on, because I think they think it's too simple.
Yeah, for many clinicians and shift workers and entrepreneurs, do you have some most effective strategies to get realigned with your circadian rhythm and like timing of light exposure? Let's say you do have to work and you do have to be in a building all day. What
Yes.
can you actually do, maybe during your lunch breaks or 10-minute walks or things like that?
So in an ideal world, I mean, waking up 5 to 10 minutes pre-sunrise and then watching the sunrise for as long as you can. You don't have to see the sun at the horizon because the entire outdoor environment's bathed in that spectrum. So sunrise is by far the most powerful thing in my mind, because it sets the stage for circadian alignment. I call it the first domino you push to really have a system's effect.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, I would say opening windows is very important, because we want to avoid that altered spectrum from low emission glass, and then you want the full spectrum through. Even just cracked open a little bit makes a huge difference in terms of changing the spectrum indoors. And then taking sun breaks, you know, eating lunch outside. I think that's a very doable one for a lot of people who work indoors.
Blue light glasses you recommend? Or
during the daytime, I think it's kind of annoying to wear, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a protective effect that getting full spectrum sunlight has to some degree. So during the day, I would just say getting those sun breaks is enough. The blue glasses, more so dark orange and red, I reserve for nighttime, because you want to block that isolated blue, which disrupts melatonin, causes circadian disruption.
So if you're on your laptop at night or you're in front of a screen, wearing those nighttime blockers is a good idea.
That's one option. I kind of view it as insurance, because it allows you to control the lights that you can't necessarily change.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like F-Lux, Iris, one-tap zap on computers and laptops that you can use to do full red, block most of the blue.
Wait, what are those? Those are like programs on your
It's like
computer?
software.
Oh, and it does changes the light emission on your laptop?
Yeah. So I'm sure you've seen people have the full red screens.
Not really.
Really?
No.
Okay, it's a really nice hack.
Okay.
So
Well, now tell me the name again.
F.lux is one for the computer,
Uh-huh.
and then onetapzap.com is one for the phone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I need to do that.
So you just do like a triple click and turns it all
Do you
red.
have that on your devices?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Nice little insurance policy
And
there.
it doesn't become annoying for efficiency and work.
You have to get used to it.
Oh.
If you're doing color work, I don't think it's going to work at all, but
Yeah.
you have to get used to it.
Mm-hmm. For
But,
emails, it's probably fine.
Yeah, exactly. For basic stuff. And outside of that, I think during the nighttime, it's very important for everyday people to kind of embody because the nighttime is just so integral to circadian signaling. Like the light and dark cycle is a coupled system that goes together. So make it as dark as possible. Use beeswax candles. Use incandescents.
And then putting on those red light bulbs, do you recommend those?
Sure. If you can get incandescents, I think those are the best outside of firelight. And then also covering the skin with a basic layer of clothing, because your skin is light sensing, or just inside.
At night, you mean at night, yeah, pajamas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. How about best practices for, your, I guess, hair and scalp and things like that? Like what is like an itchy the same here on your scalp when you have hair density and hair blocking?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to show that red and infrared could actually impact hair growth.
Yes.
To what degree, I don't know, but it's a very interesting area of study. Hair follicles actually follow a circadian rhythm. So, if you're not getting enough sun, you're under isolated blue at night, you are destroying hair follicles on a long enough time scale. And then outside of that, I do think there's obviously a genetic component to hair loss, but
well, there's so many red light hats and devices out there that do definitely stimulate. They vasodilate, they help with hair follicle growth. That I think is very scientifically proven. Do you use any form of sunscreen personally? Zero.
I have melanin. I mean, I'm more darker skinned, so...
I think there's a little bit of a mythology there because darker skinned people assume they can't or won't get skin cancers, but they are getting them at higher rates than ever. Sure. What do you say to that?
I would say if you consider that most people are spending 90 to 95% of their time indoors.
And then they're getting fried the minute they step out, so they have a built-in tolerance,
that's a problem.
skin tolerance.
That's a problem. But I will say I have received a lot of anecdotal reports of people who, even lighter skinned redheads, who report not burning, being able to build more melanin using the sort of framework that I'm laying out. So I think this speaks to circadian and evolutionary biology where people are in let's say a misaligned environment, and the problems that manifest are a result of that rather than full spectrum sunlight in circadian alignment.
What do you think about applying sunscreen on your fancy real estate of your face and your neck and where you don't want to age, and then letting the rest of the body have its sun? I know all the dermatologists are cringing right now as they say
Sure, absolutely, and I'm willing to sit down with any dermatologist out there. I would say it's a matter of informed consent.
Yes.
So if you are somebody who wants to use sunscreen, go ahead. I would say that there are a lot of other factors that contribute to accelerated aging, like the altered spectrums, the tanning booths which use isolated UV,
terrible
processed food. There's a lot of things that are responsible for these damaging effects, and again, I always go back to all anti-cancer processes are under circadian control. So.
Well, what do you say about first principles thinking? I know that's one of your principles. You do a podcast of your own. What's the name of your podcast?
The 2 a.m. podcast.
And what do you like to focus on?
A little bit of health, a little bit of circadian stuff, but mostly just talking to cool people, getting great guests on,
Yeah. What is first principles thinking, and how does that strip away the noise and focus on fundamental truths in biology?
Well, for me, it's really just studying an area or a subject from the standpoint of what do we already know, for sure. And so I think if we can start from that ground level, then you can build upon that epistemologically to where you can develop a strong enough foundation to be able to speak on things or develop a really cohesive worldview. But for me, it's just understanding, like, for example, the body is a circadian system. That's an example of a first principle. It's undeniable at a certain point. So it's just kind of that line of thinking.
Yeah. Are there specific wavelengths or exposure durations or kind of timing protocols to optimize circadian entrainment that you're talking about? I do boot camp, circadian boot camp.
Do I personally do circadian boot camps?
Or would you recommend like timelines, durations, like how to really get into circadian rhythm regulation?
Got you. Yeah, I mean, I have a course. I never thought I would have a course, but I'm not really interested in plugging it, to be honest. I'd say 15 to 20 minutes morning time, 5 to 10 minutes midday, and then making it as dark as possible during the nighttime. That's really that's the 90-10 of this work. And so you can go into the nuance as much as you want, but what I say is that the principles are very simple, the science is very complex.
So when you're putting on sunscreen first thing in the morning, you're getting up, rushing out the door to work, you think you're being a good girl and you're applying your sunscreen liberally all over. You're saying that's the worst possible thing you can do.
I'm telling people that there's more informed consent on the table,
Mm-hmm.
that it could potentially create an environment on the skin where you could be creating more damage, because again, you're blocking UVA and UVB. You're not touching blue light. Most sunscreen options do not touch blue light, which is a high energy wavelength that penetrates the skin. And there are options these days that block infrared, which is just crazy in my mind.
Yeah.
So you're creating that altered spectrum. Now, do I believe that sunscreen causes skin cancer? No. I don't think the evidence supports that. I think there's a lot more nuance involved. But at the end of the day, even a mineral or chemical-based sunscreen has a, let's say, pro and a con depending on your worldview.
I think people don't realize that enough. They think it's all pro. And I'm not sure that I would alter my sunscreen practices that much for my face. For my body, for sure. Like when I'm out there in the sun, I'm letting my legs, my back, my arms are taking all that good and all the full spectrum light in because I need to make my vitamin D, as you said.
Yeah.
I want to get my body more attuned to UVA and UVB and like let my defense mechanisms work.
Yeah.
Because in a way, you untrain your defense mechanisms for your skin as well.
Exactly. You break the entire hormetic process.
Yeah.
Because you're not allowing yourself to build melanin. There's a lot of evidence showing that, you know, if you block UVA and UVB to the degree of like 95 to 99%, depending on the SPF, that's going to create second and third order consequences. So in line with first principles thinking, we also take into account systems thinking. If you recklessly throw an input into the system, it creates a backfiring mechanism. So that's kind of how I think how this. I'm very controversial in the space, so
you are.
You know,
I
will
thought
have
that would be fun to have you
disagreements.
here because of the controversy. But those principles are very true in physics and biochemistry. So for me, that's what rang true. Like you're talking about humans evolutionary evolving with full spectrum light for millions of years, and then in the last 50 years, we decided to block this portion of UVA, UVB, and all of those frequencies from our daily existence.
And nobody's saying to burn, by the way.
We don't.
I am not an advocate of burning at all. I think there's a lot of nuance in burning in relation to the literature, but you know, we're just telling you to offer or have some common sense circadian practices in order to get the benefits that full spectrum sunlight has.
It's funny because then there's this explosion of vitamin D deficiencies being diagnosed, right? It's like suddenly they're peaking. Like, I wonder why. Because sunscreen has been indoctrinated into all of us to such an extent that, like, the brief period of time in summer when we do get more daily regular sun exposure, we're not even getting it, the UV creation that. So it's so super fascinating, I think.
Yeah. And there's so much to explore in this world, like, you know, the relationship between near infrared and UV and how that actually negates any cytotoxicity to the cell. You
actually had talked about some studies that showed that fibroblasts exposed to certain amounts of UV radiation had differing levels of repair and more and less collagen production. Do you remember those studies?
I believe that was, are you talking about the near infrared with UV?
Yes.
That was in a journal of dermatology as well. That was, I think, in the 90s.
Talk about that. What did that show?
So it basically showed that there is a synergistic relationship between UV and near infrared. So near infrared is about 20 to 22% of the total solar spectrum. UV is only 3 to 5%. So nature has figured this balance out perfectly for a circadian system. But they basically showed that when you precondition cells to near infrared, after about 3 sessions, not too long of a time, and then you expose them to UV, there was no damage. Meaning
fibroblasts, yeah.
Exactly. Cytotoxicity was not present.
So this was a cell culture study looking at fibroblasts that were pre-treated with UV, with infrared, 3 sessions, near infrared, and that primed them so that the UV didn't cause mutations.
And it was cumulative, meaning it wasn't a one-time thing. It actually worked with itself and had some momentum, right? And so I think the core of the issue with the research that I have today, at least from the centralized perspective, is that it's using isolated UV without this understanding of full spectrum synergy.
Yeah.
And it's doing it on nocturnal animals which have different skin barrier in terms of its repair and function cycles. You know, in vitro, that's a problem. It's done under isolated blue light, so it's just, if we can get some light controls, if we can try to understand it on human beings, that would be more efficacious in my mind.
Interesting. Are there antioxidants or herbals, botanicals that you recommend to improve also and synergistically work with the full spectrum light?
Astaxanthin is something that I've heard of a lot. If you can get that from wild-caught seafood or a high-quality supplement, I mean, probably all for that. Big fan of DHA from wild-caught fatty fish or marine life, because DHA is a very interesting molecule. It's been around for like 500 million years, has a very intricate relationship with full-spectrum sunlight exposure, and in my opinion, it actually is one of the reasons why we are human beings. So it's a very important molecule to get into your diet. Outside of that, it's not really a realm that I have dove too deep into.
I love antioxidants for the skin surface, so like vitamin C, green tea, EGCG, the very potent antioxidants that will help alleviate some of the reactive oxygen species that get created when these cells are damaged or exposed to too much UV. So those are things people can do in the background to improve skin health and skin turnover, and also as an adjunct. Like if you are going to experiment with sun exposure without sunscreen, I would definitely use some of these other tools like antioxidants in your diet as well as topically. Would be very important. Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and opening up yourself to all the arrows and spears that will be thrown.
I'll take all of them.
No, but I think it's important for us as scientists to think bigger picture. Like you said, the principles of physics, that the light is a beautifully evolved wavelength collection. And here we are chopping it up and self-selecting portions of it, so we're missing some of the benefits. And I think people really love the sun, and animals love the sun. Animals gravitate towards the sun.
Yeah.
There's so many healing properties in the sun. There's so many studies from, the days of polio and, these kids that grew up in the iron lung. And they were sent up to the sun and Lake Arrowhead in the mountains, and they didn't have the drugs and the molecular technologies that we have now. They had the sun. And honestly, it was very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas that it's just exploding right now from what I see, but again, I think I'm so oriented around education and not trying to be so divisive about it. Sometimes I can be because that's my personality, but education first and foremost.
Yeah, read, be curious, be a curious person out there, be a first principles thinker. Where can people find you to check out your podcast, your newsletter? Tell us all the things.
The 2AM podcast on all platforms, and then at Zaid K Dahhaj, so ZaidK Dahhaj. I think Substack, X, Instagram is pretty much most of my platforms.
Love it. Well, guys, you can find me on my Instagram. It's Beauty by Dr. K, DRKAY, doing amazing things with people's faces. And our website is the same. It's beautybydrk.com. We do have sunscreens on our website, and I'm even going to give you a sample and some nice topical. I love my triple shot serum. It has resveratrol, green tea, caffeine. It's really great for skin, and guys love it. So I think it's a combination of worlds, but we must fuse modern medicine, dermatology, and thinking of bigger principles and looking at light as full spectrum, healthful, beneficial, but it's the way you dose it. It's how you build up the tolerance.
As with anything.
That's it for now, guys. Stay beautiful.